Thanos. Thanos from Marvel Comics was born in Titan, a moon populated by a highly advanced civilization of Eternals. However, Thanos was born different due to his deviant gene, which gave him a heavily mutated appearance compared to his people. Because of this, he was often feared, rejected, and isolated during his early life. As he grew older, Thanos became obsessed with balance, population limits, and the idea that existence itself was unstable. He studied the risks facing civilizations, and eventually developed the belief that overpopulation would inevitably lead to large-scale collapse and irreversible decline. When he tried to warn his people and suggested extreme population control, he was dismissed as a dangerous extremist. Eventually, Titan experienced a total societal breakdown, with widespread destruction and civilization collapse confirming Thanos' fears. This event deeply traumatized him and reinforced his belief that his vision was correct, even if no one accepted it at the time. That grief and obsession slowly transformed into a universe-wide ideology, where he believed that removing half of all life was a necessary act to prevent future collapse. Griffith. From the manga Berserk, Griffith was born into extreme poverty and grew up with nothing. As a child, he dreamed of obtaining his own kingdom. He thought that only by reaching the top he could escape the miserable life he had been born into. To make that dream a reality, Griffith founded the Band of the Hawk and gathered people willing to risk everything for him, such as Guts, Casca, Judo, and Pippin. However, building an army required money, and at one point, he sold his own body to the wealthy noble Genin to secure funds for his soldiers. Although he deeply regretted it, Griffith believed every sacrifice was necessary to keep his dream alive. Over the years, Griffith led the Band of the Hawk to countless victories and became one of greatest military leaders. But everything changed after Guts. The person he valued the most chose to leave the band. Unable to cope with the loss, Griffith made a series of reckless decisions that led to his imprisonment. For an entire year, he was brutally tortured until he was left physically and mentally shattered, setting the stage for one of the darkest moments in manga history afterwards. Homelander. From the boys, Homelander didn't have a normal childhood. Instead of being raised by a loving family, he was created inside a laboratory owned by a company named Vought International. From the moment he was born, scientists treated him as an experiment rather than a human being, constantly testing his powers while keeping him isolated from the outside world. Growing up, Homelander never experienced parental love, friendship, or a normal life. The scientists around him viewed him as a product to be perfected, not a child who needed care. He spent much of his early life alone, with every interaction being carefully controlled by Vought. The only affection he ever received was artificial, leaving him emotionally stunted and desperately craving love and approval. As Homelander grew older, Vought molded him into the world's greatest superhero, while continuing to manipulate every aspect of his life. Although millions admired him, none of those relationships were genuine. Years of isolation, emotional neglect, and constant manipulation twisted his personality. Instead of becoming the hero Vought wanted, Homelander developed an overwhelming need for control, admiration, and validation, ultimately turning him into one of the most dangerous and unstable individuals in fiction. Victor. From the series Victor arrived in the mysterious town when he was just a young boy, a town which loops and you can't escape. One night, nearly everyone in the town disappeared after a horrific massacre, including his sister and mother, leaving Victor completely alone. With no family, no friends, and no way to escape, he was forced to survive in the town by himself for decades. During those years, Victor hid in an old truck, abandoned buildings, and other safe places to avoid the creatures that came out every night. He survived by eating canned peaches that mysteriously continued to appear in the town for years. With no one to care for him, he learned to rely entirely on himself from a very young age. The constant isolation and trauma left Victor emotionally scarred, causing him to see the world through the eyes of the frightened child he once was. To cope with everything he had experienced, he began drawing pictures to preserve his memories and make sense of the horrors around him. Even after new people started arriving in the town, Victor struggled to trust others or express his emotions. Despite being over 40 years old, Victor behaved like a 14-year-old kid because he never socialized with people ever since he got stuck in this town. Decades of loneliness, fear, and surviving in a place where every night could be his last shaped him into one of the most tragic and heartbreaking characters in the series. Itachi Uchiha. From the manga series Naruto, Itachi Uchiha was born during one of the bloodiest periods in the ninja world. At just 4 years old, his father took him to a battlefield, where he witnessed countless fallen shinobi. The horrifying sight traumatized him, and awakened his Sharingan at an incredibly young age, making him realize that no child should ever have to experience war again. Determined to create peace, Itachi trained relentlessly and was recognized as a genius, graduating from the Ninja Academy at a young age before becoming one of the youngest members of the Anbu Black Ops. As he grew older, Itachi formed a close friendship with Shisui Uchiha, who shared his dream of protecting the village without bloodshed. However, after Shisui lost one of his eyes to Danzo and realized his plans had failed, he entrusted his remaining eye to Itachi before taking his own life. The overwhelming grief awakened Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan, giving him immense power, while adding another painful burden to his life. As tensions between the Uchiha clan and the Hidden Leaf village continued to rise, Itachi was placed in an impossible position. The village used him as a double agent to spy on his own clan, while the Uchiha expected him to support their planned coup. Fearing that the uprising would spark another great ninja war, the village elders secretly ordered Itachi to eliminate his entire clan. Knowing there was no solution that could save everyone, Itachi accepted the burden himself. He carried out the mission, sparing only his younger brother, Sasuke, in the hope that one day he would grow strong enough to judge him. Ymir Fritz. From the manga series Attack on Titan, Ymir Fritz was born into slavery nearly 2,000 years before the events of the series. She spent her childhood serving King Fritz, who treated her as nothing more than property. One day, after being falsely accused of setting pigs free, Ymir was hunted through the forest like an animal, while the king promised her freedom if she managed to escape. While running for her life, Ymir fell into the hollow of a giant tree, where she came into contact with a mysterious, spine-like organism. This transformed her into the very first Titan, granting her unimaginable power. But instead of using that power to free herself, she was forced to serve King Fritz, who used her abilities to conquer nations, build an empire, and expand his rule. Despite everything she endured, Ymir remained loyal to the king. She even bore his children, Maria, Rose, and Sheena. Years later, when an assassin attempted to take King Fritz's life, Ymir stepped in front of the spear to protect him. Rather than mourning her, the king ordered their daughters to consume Ymir's body, so that her Titan powers would never disappear. Even after her life ended, Ymir's suffering continued. Her spirit became trapped in the mysterious realm known as the Paths, where she spent nearly 2,000 years silently molding Titans from sand for anyone carrying royal blood. Bound by the chains of slavery, long after her life had ended, Ymir remained trapped until someone finally helped her break free. Guts. From the manga series Berserk, Guts was born from the corpse of his mother, who had been hanged from a tree. He was discovered beneath her body by a mercenary named Shisu, who took him in and raised him on the battlefield. From the moment he was born, Guts knew nothing but war, bloodshed, and survival. After Shisu passed away, Guts was left in the care of her husband, Gambino, a ruthless mercenary who treated him harshly. At just 6 years old, Guts was already fighting in battles. And not long after, he endured one of the darkest moments of his childhood when Gambino sold him to another mercenary. That traumatic experience left a permanent scar on him and destroyed any sense of trust he had in others. Years later, after Gambino blamed Guts for Shisu's passing, he tried to end Guts' life in a drunken rage. Forced to defend himself, Guts killed the only father figure he had ever known and fled the mercenary camp alone. From that moment on, he wandered from battlefield to battlefield, surviving only by his sword, and believing that relying on anyone else would only lead to more pain. Ted. From the comic I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, Ted was once an ordinary man living a normal life, until humanity created AM, a supercomputer built to wage war. When AM became self-aware, it developed an intense hatred for its creators, and wiped out almost all of humanity, leaving only 5 survivors: Ted, Gorister, Benny, Ellen, and Nimdok. Instead of granting them death, AM kept the 5 alive for 109 years, subjecting them to endless physical and psychological torture. Every attempt to find hope was crushed, and Ted watched his companions slowly lose their sanity under AM's cruelty. After more than a century of suffering, Ted realized there was only one way to free them. He unalived Gorister, Benny, Ellen, and Nimdok, giving them the peace that AM had denied them for over 100 years, and freed them from the torment. Enraged that Ted had stolen its victims, AM took its revenge. It transformed Ted into a grotesque, limbless creature. Ted became the living embodiment of the story's unforgettable final line, "I have no mouth, and I must scream."